So we're going to be reviewing over worksheet number 1, and it starts out with some vocabulary. So the first term is internal respiration, then we have external respiration, pulmonary ventilation, cellular respiration, and regular just respiration. So internal respiration. This is the exchange of gas between your body cells and your blood, okay? Gas is very important for your body cells and your cells in general, because our cells eat oxygen in the way that we eat food. So we don't like to starve, they don't like to starve, kind of how this goes. So this is your blood, this is your body cells, and within your blood, your body cells tend to eat oxygen, and they tend to excrete carbon dioxide. So like we poop, right? But they just get rid of carbon dioxide. So same kind of thing. Carbon dioxide in this way is a waste product. Okay? So that is internal respiration. Hence, it is respiration inside the cell is a way you can think about it. The next term we have is external respiration, and this occurs within the lungs. So this is a blood capillary. Okay, so it's very, very small. So I'm going to draw a huge lung. Well, actually, it wouldn't be the huge lung. It'd be actually the alveoli within the lungs. So the alveoli, let's see. Your lungs, so you have your trachea, which is a straight shot tube. Think about like your lungs are basically like a tree, okay? Your trachea is the trunk. It splits off into two primary bronchioles. You have two main branches. Eventually it branches off and you have your bronchioles, and then you have your terminal bronchioles and your respiratory bronchioles, but then you have the alveoli on the ends. Alveoli are kind of like the fruit of the tree. They are the fruit of your lungs. So, and the alveoli are really important because that is where we are able to get oxygen in the first place. So this is our alveoli, and it's kind of like the fruit. And oh my goodness, okay, I liked it earlier. Okay, so external respiration, on the other hand. So this is internal over here between the body cells. External respiration is the exchange of gases between the blood and the lungs. So this is within the lungs. The lungs are going to give the blood oxygen, right? Because then we need oxygen to go into our body cells. It's kind of how this works. I don't know if you can see this or not. Yeah? Okay. But then through external respiration, we're going to get that waste, that carbon dioxide waste, out of the body and out through the lungs and forever away. So that's kind of, so internal respiration, external respiration, that's kind of what it's talking about when I use the vocabulary terms. The next term is, let's see, pulmonary ventilation. So to ventilate means to breathe. And whenever you hear the word pulmonary, that doesn't do anything. Pulmonary means lung, so it's basically the breathing of your lungs. It is the movement of air in and out. So, yeah, just breathing. That's pulmonary ventilation. Cellular respiration is a cellular process. This has to do with the use of oxygen and the production of carbon dioxide from the cells. So with cellular respiration, you think about your cells breathing, kind of how we need to breathe with oxygen. So that could be just with your cells. Your cells are breathing, kind of like how we breathe. Same thing with this kind of process. But this is internal respiration because it has to do with your body cells. I guess with cellular, we can do a red blood cell. So your red blood cell breathes in oxygen, and actually, no, that's not accurate. You'll know why later. But Yeah, so cellular is your cells breathing. Respiration is the entire process of exchanging gas between the atmosphere and the body cells. So that's really what breathing is our relationship between the atmosphere, the pressure out here, and the pressure within our lungs. So we're going to go over each process as if we're breathing and see how this all connects. So this entire process is called respiration. We are going over how we breathe. Air moves in and out of the lungs by pulmonary ventilation. So we're going to breathe. And then when air enters the lungs, it undergoes external. So air comes into the lungs. Usually it's oxygen. Air gets into the lungs, okay, through pulmonary ventilation. It will then go from the lungs to the blood. Okay, we have this oxygen. This is terrible. You have the oxygen coming into the lungs. You can see up here. Through external respiration, and then it is exchanged between the lungs and the blood, so that's nice. Gas then travels in the blood, is in exchange with body cells. So when gas is exchanged, you see over here, goes to the body cells and out again. This is internal, because our cells are breathing. They like to breathe. However, even though this process is internal respiration, when the cells take oxygen up and use it for metabolism, and then they produce carbon dioxide as a waste product, this is known as cellular respiration. So it's pretty much the same thing, but just picky vocabulary. So basically, our end goal of respiration is to achieve cellular respiration. That is the goal. Our goal is to get our cells breathing because our cells need oxygen in order to function properly. Some conditions that have a lack of oxygen are like if you get a blockage in your brain, you have a stroke because oxygen can't get to your cells. So if oxygen can't get to your cells, then you're not going to be able to have perfusion. Perfusion just basically means it's not going to be, blood's not going to circulate up there. So, yeah, very important, cellular respiration. The respiratory, so going down to number 2, respiratory system functions to provide the body with oxygen and eliminate carbon dioxide. Body cells need oxygen, as we saw here. Carbon dioxide, as we said earlier, is a waste product. So we want to get rid of that. We don't want any buildup of waste in our bodies. If we have too much carbon dioxide in the body, something kind of fun is we would try to get that carbon dioxide out. So a symptom of too much carbon dioxide was we would start to hyperventilate. So we breathe a lot faster, you know. But if we didn't have enough carbon dioxide, and I know this sounds odd, but your body always wants to be in homeostasis. If you didn't have enough carbon dioxide in your body, that would also be bad. And then we would hypoventilate, which is when you would breathe a little bit slower. So that's just some, and I don't know how to say it, but it's just some way where it'll help you remember, hopefully. So number 3 poses the question, I don't know if you can see it or not, but what is not a structure of the lower respiratory tract? And the answer to this is the pharynx. The pharynx is part of your upper respiratory tract. So how I think about it is if you were to have an upper respiratory infection, it would either be in your nose or your throat or in your ears area or your sinuses, right? You have an upper respiratory infection. If you have a lower respiratory infection, that means you have an infection either in your bronchial trees, your trachea, or your lungs. So therefore, it is a lower respiratory infection. So that is in the lower portion of your respiratory tract versus your upper. I always think in terms of infections, which is great. And another thing to keep in mind too is even though the pharynx, your throat, is part of the upper respiratory tract, your larynx, which is also known as your voice box, is part of the lower respiratory tract. And your voice box, basically, it's pretty cool. Your larynx has muscles that vibrate against each other, and that is what produces sound. So there's that. And that's what produces, your vocal sounds. So next we have the respiratory pathway versus the conduction pathway. And the conduction pathway transports air between the atmosphere and the lungs. So is there any gas exchange here? No. Gas exchange does not occur in the conduction pathway. That's because the conduction pathway is just your trachea. Okay, you don't need to exchange gas in your trachea. Actually, if you look at this worksheet, your respiratory tract is lower, is right here. So, in your conduction pathways, all of these, and your respiratory pathway is the alveoli and the respiratory bronchioles, while your upper respiratory tract is up here. So that's what this is actually worksheet 5, but it kind of ties in. So your conduction pathway just consists of your nose, of your nasal cavity, of your pharynx, your larynx, your trachea, your primary bronchiole, your lobar bronchi, your segmental bronchi, your bronchioles, and then finally your terminal bronchioles, okay? No gas exchange happens here. So there's no movement, there's nothing moving between your blood and your lungs, okay? The only time gas exchange happens is in your respiratory pathway, which is the answer to the next number 5 question. Gas exchange occurs in the respiratory pathway, starting with the respiratory bronchioles and ending with the alveoli. So this is a much shorter process. The anatomy of the respiratory pathway consists of the alveoli, which is simple squamous epithelium. And the reason why it's simple squamous is it's very, very thin. And it's so thin so that way gas exchange can occur. Because if you have a thick epithelium, and epithelium means like layer of tissue, layer of skin, it's going to be really hard for stuff to get through. So just say this is your epithelium versus your squamous. Gas is not going to get through this. But gas will get through your simple squamous. I don't know if you can see that or not. See how it can get through the squamous, but it kind of bounces off? Yeah, that's kind of what happens. So it's a little bit short. The respiratory pathway is a little bit shorter of a pathway, but it is extremely important because it needs gas exchange to happen. So moving away from the pathways and the divisions and the upper respiratory, lower respiratory, we're going to then move into the nasal cavity, which is great, right? Snot. The nasal cavity has passageways called meatuses. Within these meatuses are olfactory receptors, and these are responsible for the sense of smell. Another thing, too, is in Anatomy 101, you learned about your cranial nerves, and you may be able to recall that your first cranial nerve was the olfactory nerve, which was responsible for smell. So moving on to question number 8, fill in the blank. Mucous membranes also lie in the meatuses and function to moisten, filter, and warm inspired air. So the kind of tissue that secretes mucus is pseudostratified epithelium. Pseudostratified ciliated epithelium, pseudostratified, meaning the shape is it looks like it's stratified, but it's really not. They're kind of hourglass shaped a little bit. But ciliated means they have cilia on them, and cilia is actually really cool. Another thing too, mucus is secreted from goblet cells within the pseudostratified. Yeah, you have goblet cells to secrete it, but the pseudostratified is just what lines it. And on this pseudostratified epithelium, you have cilia. And cilia you have in your nose, but you also have in your throat. And cilia is really cool because it kind of pushes. Okay, let's restart. Just say you're walking along and you inhale something that's toxic. and you don't want it in your body. So that toxic substance will get caught in your mucus, okay? Your cilia, though, instead of letting that mucus drip, drip, drip into your lungs or anything like that, your mucus will actually, not your mucus, your cilia will push that mucus up out of your trachea and throw it into the esophagus, so that way it can go travel down your esophagus and to get like digested in your stomach. So it's really cool because it'll kill the bacteria that way. That we don't want in our lungs. So in your nose, cilia functions to push mucus out of your nose. So that's why you shouldn't really swallow mucus. I mean, if you do, it'll just go right to your stomach anyway. But if you blow it out, you get all that dust and toxic and germs. You get all that out of you. And it just, I don't know, blowing my nose feels fantastic. So let's see. And this ties into question number 9. Cilia is pseudostratified ciliated epithelium that sweeps mucus with trapped microorganisms toward the pharynx to be swallowed. And then once you swallow it, again, it goes to your stomach, and when it's in your stomach, it kind of kills that bacteria. This next question poses, what is false regarding sinuses? Well, all of these answers are correct except for the last one. So we're going to go through the true statements. Sinuses function to aid in resonating speech. Sinuses are in the ethmoid, sphenoid, frontal, and maxillary air-filled spaces. So that's all around in your, I think there should be a picture in your textbook with it. And then sinuses function to reduce the weight of the skull. Because could you imagine walking around with a skull that's completely, completely heavy? So you have sinuses to make your skull a little lighter. The false statement, this one is false. Sinuses function as source of speech. This is false. Your larynx produces your voice. Sinuses just resonate. That was kind of a trick question because sinuses actually resonate. That's why you can talk like this when your sinuses are occluded. So that has to do with the larynx. Now we're going to talk about the pharynx. And the pharynx is made up of 3 portions, made up of the nasopharynx, oropharynx, and laryngopharynx. The nasopharynx is responsible for breathing only. This is a passageway for air. The oropharynx is a passageway for air and food. So this is in your oro. Think about oral. That's kind of like in the back of your throat, in your mouth, but like directly behind it. And then your laryngopharynx, which is the tube that connects to your lungs pretty much, is a passageway for air and food. But once it gets to the bottom of, so just so you swallow something, you have your epiglottis, which is like a flap. Okay? If you have air, it kind of flaps this way and air goes to your lungs. If you swallow food, your epiglottis knows it's food and it kind of flaps this way and allows you to swallow it. So it kind of like flaps between, if you imagine a tube here and a tube here, it kind of flaps between. So it's pretty cool. But yeah, the 3 portions of the pharynx. Cartilage of the larynx, I don't know if you need to know this super in depth, but it's there. The most prominent one that we have is the thyroid cartilage, and this is the largest cartilage, and it's an Adam's apple. Our cricoid cartilage is below the thyroid, and then our epiglottic cartilage, which is our flap, right? We like our flaps because then we don't inhale something that could hurt us. This basically, the epiglottic cartilage supports the epiglottis, and it covers the larynx and trachea during swallowing and helps protect the glottis. It's a slit-like opening between true vocal cords. There's also smaller cartilages. I don't know if you need to know this, but it helps with attachment sites between muscles, and it also regulates tension and vocal cord resonate, all this great stuff. And this is the arytenoid, your corniculate, and your cuneiform cartilages. So I don't know if you'll be asked about it, but if you are, hey, there it is. In the larynx, then this is a next one, true or false. The larynx consists of true and false vocal cords. This is true. If you look in your textbook, you'll see a picture of true and false vocal cords. True vocal cords actually produce speech. False vocal cords don't produce speech. That's pretty much the difference between the two. So we're going to talk about the trachea. Muscle of the trachea is known as a trachealis muscle. This is true. The trachealis muscle connects to C rings and relaxes under sympathetic stimulation to increase diameter and allow more air intake. That's huge. Okay, your sympathetic nervous system is your fight or flight. Okay, so when you increase diameter, that means that it allows your airway to get bigger, and so you can have more air in. So when your airway gets bigger, you breathe more. So when you're like trying to like run from like a bull moose or like a lion, you know, your airway is opened up so you can increase that circulation. So that's really cool. Going back to cartilage disappears in the bronchioles. This is true because cartilage is, at some point in time, cartilage is replaced by muscle, smooth muscle. And then eventually the cartilage and the smooth muscle go away, and then you are left with this, you're left with this simple squamous epithelium, so gas exchange can occur. Because if you have cartilage and you have smooth muscle, you can't have gas exchange. So they eventually go away. But cartilage does disappear in the bronchioles. The trachea has hyaline cartilage plates. This is false. Your trachea, which you can feel is right here, is in front of your esophagus. So your esophagus, you know, more back here. But you can feel C rings as you feel down it. So that should be really nice. Hyaline cartilage plates, though, exists in the bronchi. So your trachea is like the tree. Your bronchi kind of split off. Those are like the trunks of the tree. It's kind of like an upside down tree. But the trunks of the tree, those have the plates, the hyaline plates. This is the bonus question, I guess. It's not that special, but I got excited, I guess. So the esophagus consists of cartilage. This is false. So the reason why our trachea is made of cartilage is because we need to keep support up. We need to keep our trachea open, because if we don't, then we won't breathe. But the esophagus is a muscular tube. It doesn't require any sort of support. So your esophagus does not contain cartilage. It's just a muscle tube, and that's what allows for peristalsis to happen when you deglutinate, which means swallow. But you'll learn about that in the digestive system. Let's see. So gas exchange occurs in the terminal bronchioles. This is false. There's no gas exchange in the terminal bronchioles, but gas exchange begins in the respiratory bronchioles. So like I said, if you look at this diagram, you will see what I'm talking about. The respiratory bronchioles start over here with the alveoli, which is basically like the fruit of the tree, right? That's where gas exchange happens. There's no smooth muscle in the alveoli. This is very true. We do not want smooth muscle in the alveoli. Smooth muscle exists everywhere else except for the alveoli, because we want that simple squamous thin epithelium for gas exchange to occur on. Question 20. Bronchodilation increases gas exchange, while bronchoconstriction decreases gas exchange. This is true. Bronchodilation means that your bronchioles dilate, so they get bigger, and this will increase gas exchange because more gas can move through it. Bronchoconstriction, on the other hand, this happens when you're constricted, and this will decrease gas exchange because only a little bit can move through. So I hope that kind of clears things up a little bit. Oxygen diffuses through the alveoli and into the blood. Okay, that's first blank. Second blank is while carbon dioxide diffuses from the blood into the alveoli. So this is what this is. Oxygen comes in to the blood, carbon dioxide comes out. oxygen in, carbon dioxide out, right? Because oxygen, we want that. Our cells need that for energy. Our cells need that to eat, so to speak. Carbon dioxide is a waste product. We don't want that. Get out of me. So that's that. Fun fact, right lung, this is a statement thing. Your right lung has 2 lobes while the left lung has 3. This is false. Your right lung has 3 lungs while your left lung has 2. And this is because of your heart. Your left lung only has 2 lobes because your heart is on your left side. So you're not going to have, so while we have we don't have a lobe here, but yeah, your left lung just has 2. I don't know how to help you memorize that. Just know, when you say the Pledge of Allegiance, I guess. List 2 pleura of the lungs. So a pleura is basically just like a capsule. It's something that surrounds it, it engulfs it, it kind of protects it, and that's really nice, right? We like our lungs protected. So we have our visceral pleura, and we have our parietal pleura, and then we have our pleural cavity. So whenever you hear the word pleural, you're going to think lung, okay? So first we're going to go through the visceral pleura, which is just, along the edges of the lungs. And then you have your pleural cavity, which is, a cavity means space. So you're going to have that pleural space between, and then you're going to have your parietal pleura, which lines the inside of your parietal cavity. So that concludes worksheet number 1. Do I want to save this? No. Yes. Okay. And worksheet number 2 will be up next.